Hi, everyone. This is Tori Vandelin with PreventConnect. This podcast is part 2 of a 3-part series where Susan Gombapour interviews Michael Jackson of Peace Pros LA. Part 1 explored the background of Peace Pros LA, and this episode takes a deeper dive into their specific prevention strategies. Enjoy!
So this is really interesting to me because, I've heard of some other interventions that are focused on violence prevention that focus, for example, on conflict resolution, de-escalation, and so on. And it does sound like that's a piece. It's sort of like, what's the alternative to violence is a piece of what you all do. But I think that you do something really unique, which is locate some of the sort of thinking or sort of the cultural immersion that we all have in different ways in our different communities about connecting that specifically to sort of masculine behavior or macho behavior or what it is to be a man, right? And so what I'm really curious about is, okay, so you come up, as a group with this idea of we're going to take this intergenerational approach. And I'm curious, what happened? Who'd you get pushback from the most, or did the youth and the adults really see themselves as partners, or did they sort of, not sort of feel don't go talk to me about that. I don't respond to that. Go talk to the coach with that language. I'm just sort of curious how you did it.
Right. I mean, wherever you shine the light on, it's going to have some pushback. And I think, and this is overall, whether through this process that we went through, it's tough. It's personal to people. And sometimes that's the blind spot because, you don't have, no one is actually, people are ready to talk, but they're not ready to reflect on it and pick it apart.
Go deep.
Go deep. This is the whole thing about diving deep. And a lot of people, some people well, what does that have to do with my job? And for me, it's whatever you are, or whoever you are, and especially I tell people right now, I'm at work more than I am with family or loved ones. There's gonna be I don't want to say a bleeding out, but those things are gonna have to happen in a way that people feel safe in these conversations, but also be able to say, you know what, let me, it's a process of digesting information and digesting things that you a minute ago thought was your own personal rule of law.
Right.
If I'm saying this to someone or talking about how we can improve, but you can't see the viable things that go against how you were raised. We're telling people, how you was raised probably wasn't that great.
Right.
No, but the difference between understanding what's healthy and then, it's like this. It's like, I think of my dad. I love my dad is the bomb. I love everything about him. I knew he grew up. That's the difference between. I just took the best. I'm trying to take the best part of him, and then the stuff that wasn't helpful to let that go. Sometimes people don't have the ability to. It's either all or nothing, and I think that's for me. And I'll just give perfect sense. Somebody told me I got male privilege. I was like, male privilege? I'm a black male. What are you talking about? Or sitting down and go, oh, I do have these forms of male privilege. Wow. I didn't even know that. And I think that's the kind of accepting of the thing that people don't, because it's always the finger out, and then we're actually right now telling people to do the finger in, pointing into themselves, who they are with themselves, who they are in group, who they are in the community. And that's that's a lot to peel back for people to be ready to do the deep work, because that's for real change. Everything else is put, you know, as a man of color. It's like for me, like I go through the day code switching all the time, you know. So being able to engage in different populations, but the whole hope is that our authentic self could be on display without the feeling of feeling less than or derived or judged in some way, shape, or form. So when I'm saying this in a very intimate way, because in those group dynamics, people take it personal. And until they get to that rough part, you know, the chaotic part, like, you know, like when I started realizing all the things that weren't helpful for my development as a human being, like I had to throw away some of my notions, you know, my thoughts of religion, right, of my own personal relationship with the church. Like there's all these different things that when you look at the messaging, like how is this opening them more doors for people, or is it closing on doors? So
these are really fundamental
response.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's all those things. It's like it. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was gonna say, like these are things that are core to us, right? Like things that often sit in question, that are almost like we're on default, like we sort of operate out of default.
Yes.
And so, you know, my background is in public health. When I think about behavior change, trying to get people to change behavior, and then these extra steps that you're talking about, which are self-reflection, self-critique, really questioning fundamental core, you know, values even that people have developed, I started feeling overwhelmed. Like, well, how do you do that? So what I am really curious is, like, if you know, so take me through, like, for example, take me through what, you know, one of your workshops, or maybe you're doing it as series. What's kind of the arc of how you start with folks, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so I know you can't go into huge amounts of detail, but if you could give kind of like an overview of where you start and how things shift and where you hope to end up, that would be really great.
Right. I mean, I guess the essence of our trainings or workshops is, one, is to create the awareness. You first got to create the awareness of what is current, what is now, where society at, and what, especially when we're talking about men, we have to dive deep in the concept of what a man is, right? We use, in different times, we use the illustration of the box, which has been a little bit informed from Jackson Katz and some of the work that he did, but there's this box that we put men in, and then until you look at all the things a man is supposed to be, and then we do exercise an idea of kind of illuminating that no man is all these things. And if you are the provider, the leader, strong, all these things, no man is all these things. So that kind of goes back to the mythical notion and the idea to reject that if you're not one of these things, you're a punk, you're a sissy, you're all these things that we equate in a feminine art, that if you're that somehow you're less than. So I mean, even during the process of dissecting man, the idea of putting women as on the same par as men. Because if not, then ultimately, if you're getting called all these things or being portrayed as all these things, and you look at, nobody looks at their mom as less than. But how do we have a cultural or societal point where, I mean, even you're able to have all these negative words have a feminine connection? And for me, illuminating the issue and stuff that is normal, gives us the opportunity to just say, and that works to say, okay, well, how do you want to define it? What do you think it is? And for us, that comes the interplay of being able to have real, honest conversations, but then real, honest understanding the pressures. You know, the same way, just like any child is not born a racist, is taught. You know, the same thing I think of is about manhood. Ain't nobody grow up going, you know what, I'm gonna be the provider, breadwinner, strong person, player. I'm gonna be it all. Like, no, that is fed to young men as a youth. That is not a freeing concept, and I think that's the whole part of being able to move somebody on that concept. I mean, this is just one workshop, but the whole idea of how all of it seeps into our cultural discussion. I mean, whether you can see it in the idea of Hillary Clinton from Donald Trump to going down to the essence of can women be leaders in this or that. It's still here. It still has all this stickiness on the idea that somehow, some way that women may be less than, but then also at the same time having men try to perform to be something that is unhealthy and not needed. And it's not good for them, for themselves or for their community. So for me, that goes back to the whole point that these conversations, these dialogues, these things of looking intimately at whatever it is, the communal culture, the school culture, the work culture, all these patriarchal notions that lead to unhealthy displays of manhood is the part of the redefining that we have to go. So somebody might just learn that day that, hey, maybe these words on the outside of this box are not good. I don't like it. And then some might leave, depending on where they're at, like the whole goal for us is to be like, how can we be better? And how can we support each other? You know? This has to, men have to support each other. You know? So for me, the whole the ability to say, hey, you didn't get there by yourself, right? And there's the idea that to hold on to the people that want a different outcome for you and yourself. So that's kind of the large notion of it, because we want to start there. But that's part of the process that some people may only get the first part. Some people may be ready to be like, well, how can I be different with my family at the end? You know what I mean? Well,
can you tell me a little bit? So it sounds like, you know, in the beginning you're doing a lot of unpacking and really shining a light on things that people take for granted, and then also helping people shift to what else could. First of all, naming things like, well, right now, if you're not a man, basically you're a woman, and a woman is less than. It's not just that there's two different gender roles, but one of them is worse. Right? Yeah. So kind of flipping the script on that. But then I'm curious that you mentioned, yes. But I'm curious, and reimagine it, right? Like, it's not about just now saying, well, let's just diminish men and women are the best and all that, but it's really about redefining, you know, each for each. But you talked about how can men support each other. So I imagine that, you know, as you're starting out and you're doing, you know, some of these sort of workshops and conversations with young men, right, in school. This was what, like, was this middle school or was this high school? Who did you start with?
Yeah, with adults. We really started talking with adults. We started with adults. So
these were the influencers.
These are influencers, yeah. And then, all that trickled down to the point of let's have these conversations with any population, no matter where they're at on their awareness or not awareness. So that's kind of where it goes from there.
How did you get into, because you were talking about, and then how can men and young men support each other now in flipping the script?
Right.
Because these were folks, it sounds like in some cases, like if you're working with the police, maybe they are in a setting where they routinely see each other, or like there is opportunity to connect. But is that always the case? Do you always build it around that?
No.
Or is it sometimes a group of people who don't know each other, and, who knows how they can support each other, right?
Well, I mean, for us, it's been going into places where people have frequent interaction with each other, whether it's faculty, whether it's the athletic team and your athletic team, like, maybe a certain nonprofit or something that may want staff. So we're looking at where places where people are going to see each other. And besides the community meetings that we have put on, which is just random people who may come, but they're all part of, maybe they all live somewhere in the West Side or something of that nature, kind of looking at the variants. But primarily we're looking at places where there's some type of culture, whether it's work culture, school culture, athletic culture. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I wonder if there's a point, so in a certain way there's already some cohesion or some connecting thread of community for these folks. But what I'm curious about then is how do you get from talking and unpacking and identifying and reimagining to something that looks more like practice, putting in practice?
I think for us right now, we like to give takeaways, things that people can look at, ways to making their own personal part to go back and be part of whatever influences they are, whether it's community or familial. I think that's the whole kind of where the wheels are turning for us also, is to look at what does it look like to have a consistent, or not consistent, but I'm over here thinking of data, but over here a place where people can want to take the 2.0 version of the things we're doing and have a collective of people who want to work in or give their time or push the principles of what that reimagining looks like, Because for us, it's one thing to go to, organizations. That's why, but as you all know, there's what an institution they give you time for and what they won't. Some have been cool enough to say, hey, here goes 6 weeks of things we could walk with people in, always to be a support for that. So for us, it's like whoever we try to keep lines of communication open for the personal or the organization, because that is the for myself, the nucleus of. There's been so many, I could say my colleagues or different people that we've had these discussions, and it's created a deeper bond amongst each other. So I can understand the idea of that same bond being that critical mass of people who may change a culture at a job, change a culture in their community, or give another option. So when I say the other option is that the freeing of the individual, of the young man, of how they see things, knowing that there's another adult or peer that they can access and have those conversations or about change or about the support or about different feelings that normally they wouldn't. So for me, that kind of informs myself and others of how do we continue to create a place of support for people who may need that external group of people to help with that change.
Okay, like building a community around them.
Thanks for listening. Tune in to Part 3 to learn more about how Peace Pros LA overcomes challenges to prevention and moves the needle to prevent violence.